Hello and welcome to the first ever IFCL game broadcast from Reynolds Wrap Rink here in Boulder, Colorado. I'm Matt Lemon, and we will go straight to the court where we will see our indoor foil curling league game play out today. Well, let's take a quick look at the two men that will be facing off tonight. First off, we have Steve Cooksey, the rookie, who is looking to win his first ever IFCL game tonight. Steve will be facing off against veteran player Matt Lenneman. This will be his third career game, and he will be playing on his home court. Matt won the opening coin flip and has elected to pot first. This means that in the final frame of the 10-frame game, he will be bowling last. And Matt is ready to go here with the first pot of the night. Let's take a look. Ooh, it's off the far right wall. That's not what Matt wanted at all. Let's take a quick look at the replay. Shot looks clean, maybe just rotated a little bit to the right. So now it is the chance for Steve here with the board open. No doubt that Steve has a little bit of the jitters here in his first IFCL toss of his career, but nonetheless, he's ready to go. It's a solid slide, but it'll end up just in the far back. Not where Steve wants it, but it should still be in the scoring range right now. Perfect shot right down the middle, bumps Matt's out of the way, and Steve slides in to score 2 points in his first game. Steve now has the first pot of the second frame. Each player alternates going first, and here's his toss. Just short. It doesn't look like it's on, but that could still get on eventually. Looking at the replay, maybe pulled up a little bit on it, left it short because of that. So an opportunity here for Matt in the second frame. He's looking up to make up a 2-point deficit. Lines up to the far right, and he goes long. Not at all what he's looking for there. You see some frustration on his face. So Steve has an opportunity. I think he's going to go for a front push of his current blocker. Oh, and he went too hard. He flipped it over. Wow, let's take a look at that replay. Wow, that is a terribly unlucky shot. But Steve's still in a scoring position right now. So he's the only one on the board. Matt just trying to get it close enough, and he ricochets it off Steve's. Keeps his on. It looks like it should be good enough for 1 point. As Steve's hung on, but Matt's ended up being closer to the center, I believe. So we're now at a score of 2-1 heading into the third frame. After a little debate over the scoring, it looks like we're ready to get back into the action. Matt is on the defensive for the top of the third frame. Here's the slide. Goes a little bit long in the back, but it's kind of out of the way. Good chance of staying on there. I would say it's a pretty solid defensive move. Steve might go for the knockoff here and go for the chance at 3, or he might just play up safely in the middle. Hope for at least a 2 or a 1 out of this round. He goes for the middle, pushes it in the back, and he's created actually a little bit of a backboard now. So it's actually a good spot for a potential 3, a Pabst Blue Ribbon trifecta that we haven't really seen yet. So Matt's lining up. He points the staff off to the right. You see that slows it down a little bit. So he's going for a super block, hoping that he can block Steve from getting that 2-point for getting the closest to the circle. So Steve is in a tough situation now. He needs to clean Matt's pot out of the middle. Secure 2 points there. And he does. Great shot. So Steve secures 2 points in the third frame. Puts himself up 4-1. The rookie out in front in the early going. Exciting. This is what the IFCL is all about. Steve has to be pretty thrilled to be up here in his first ever IFCL game. Here's his shot in the fourth frame. Leaves it short, nice little short blocker just beyond the IFCL logo. See how Matt handles that. Will he try to go around it, or will he push straight through the blocker? He goes straight for the push, and ooh, it's costly. Pushes Steve's actually closer and he knocks his own out. So Steve with an opening, nice soft little touch. And as it stands right now, Steve has both one on the board and one closest to the hole, meaning he's up 3-0 right now. So Matt's going to want to try to clean Steve's off and get close. Ooh, I don't know if he did it. It looks like Matt and Steve's pots are almost equal distance from the Pabst Blue Ribbon circle. So it looks like they're talking it over a little bit. A little bit of a debate. As the rules stand in IFCL, if it's too close to call, all pots will be awarded 1 point. And remember, it's cancellation scoring.
I'll just call it 1.
So as it stands right now, it would be 2-1 for Steve, and that looks like that's what they're going to roll as we head into round 5, which means that Steve is now up 5-1, heading into the halfway of the first game. And just for those of you that are new to the IFCL, each match consists of 3 separate games with 10 frames each, which means each player tosses 60 pots in one full match. So we're about halfway through the first game of the match. And Matt's shot lands just short of the Pabst Blue Ribbon circle, an interesting spot, not quite short enough to be a blocker, maybe a little too long to be in scoring position. I think Steve will ultimately try to just slide right on through that, knock that off the board. Ooh, Steve doesn't quite have enough push on it. So Steve and Matt's pots stay on. Steve in the scoring position. Matt bumps it back a little bit. So Matt looks like he's up by 2 as his pot is closest to the hole. Steve will ready the final pot of the round. Matt has really struggled to limit points on defense, so this is a big pot. And Steve wraps it around. Beautiful shot. Doesn't touch Matt's and slides right on in there for the 2-pointer. So with the cancellation scoring, that means that Steve scores a point on the round. So as we head into the 6th frame, that means Steve Cooksey is up 6-1 over Matt Lundman. Steve is going to be on the defensive this round now. We'll see how he opts to play. Will he go for the short block like he has earlier in the game? No, he's going to go for the little bit of a back-end miss, I would say. So this is a good opportunity for Matt. He's going to go for knocking Steve's off the back, and he does. Perfect toss there with the smaller pot. A little unusual going with a smaller size pot. So Steve, we'll see how Steve plays it. Steve goes for a short in blocker, and it looks perfect with the 2 handles serving as kind of an extra little barrier for Matt. Matt's going to have to go through Steve's. Oh, and he does. He flips the pot over. I have not seen a pot land like that, and it looks like Steve's is still in the back. Let's take a look on instant replay. Hits Matt's pot, then hits Matt's other pot, and then lands on its top. Smooth stroke there from Matt, and he should be in there to score 2 as we head into the 7th round now. Matt now on the defensive. He opts for the small pot, putting the handle out to the right, maybe hoping to get a little additional drag from it. Ooh, and he goes long. Not what Matt needs. Trailing 6-3 here in the 7th frame of the first game. So big opening here for Steve now. Lines up, nice smooth top. Oh, and he goes long, but it looks like it's just barely in the back still. So we have kind of a little bit of a pile up, a little bit of a backboard here as Matt, who's down by 3, needs some points. Smooth touch by Matt. Doesn't hit Steve's out, though. So as it stands right now, Matt would be up a point on the round. So Steve is going to go for knocking off Matt's, I believe. Hope to steal 2 points. And I don't think he quite did it. He knocked his own pot off, but Matt stays on. And Steve gets a point on the round to make the game 7-3 as we head into the 8th frame. Steve will again be on the defensive. Lines up, just knocks his other pot out of the way, and here's his toss. Nice solid pot, similar to his last defensive pot. A little bit in the back. Should be an easy one for Matt to clear off the board. Matt opts for his larger pot, the blue pot. Adjusts the Swiffer sweeper. Maybe a little bit of a debate there if he should go with a smaller pot. Here's his toss, and he tops Steve's pot over just barely out of the free go zone. but sets Matt up for a 2-point round right here, which he desperately needs. Steve's going to try to knock Matt's off, or at least push it away from being the top one, and he does. Good shot, but he might have left his pot a little too far in the back here. So Matt now is going to go investigate a little bit, see if Steve's pot is on the board. It clearly is. Matt's likely going to go for the knockoff so he can get 2 points. Otherwise, he'll get 1 if he just gets it on. And perfect shot there by Matt. It's on the board. It's not close, but it's going to still get the 2 points. So that means that the score is now 7-5. Matt has cut the deficit with 2 rounds to go in this first game. It's been an up and down game. It seems like Steve was hot in the early going, but Matt has picked up steam in the late rounds. Matt opts to go with the small pot on the defense, handle out to the right, and it's just short of the center point. We'll see if Steve can clean that. Definitely not a short blocker by any means. Steve hasn't had any trouble clearing that earlier in the game. Here's a toss. Ooh, and he clips it a little bit to the side. So Matt's pot barely moves out of the way, but Steve's looks like it's the closest. So right now he's up a point in the round. You can see Steve contemplating in the background. Matt's going with his large pot now. Ooh, and he goes for a short blocker. An interesting toss. So the middle is clogged now with 3 pot handles. It's going to be kind of a tough play here for Steve. Steve looking it over a little bit. Adjusting. Oh, and he's going to go take a look. I can't blame him. It's a tight game. Every point counts right now. As the score currently stands, I believe it would be 1 point for Steve. So would he play up, or would he go for a potential 2-pointer? It might be a little risky. It's a little hard of an angle given the placement of Matt's front blocker. It's very difficult to go down that left side.
Play it how you wish.
So we'll see how Steve opts to toss this pot here. Either way, Steve still leads by 2 in this 9th frame. Steve readies himself, tosses it down the far right side. Oh, actually, it's the left side. Hits Matt's pot, and Matt's pot is dragged into the middle. Wow. That is a 3-point swing there. As now Matt actually steals a point
1 point game
with the closest pot. Wow. So it is a 7-6 game as we head into the 10th frame. Definitely not what Steve wanted to do there. He took a lot of time thinking it over. You have to wonder if maybe he got into his head just a little bit. So Steve is on the defensive. Remember, the coin toss means that Matt is going to go last in this first game, giving him a big strategic advantage. Steve plays up as a short blocker. Good handle out to the right, so that's actually covering a lot more of that center point than it actually appears. Matt's going with his big pot first. Ooh, good block. He's able to go through the pot handle and push Steve's off. So Matt's up 2 on the round now. He needs 2 to take the lead on the game. Steve lines up. He's going to think it over a little bit. He ideally would need to knock Matt's off and keep his pot in a close enough a position to score 2, but he would still need a mistake from Matt somewhere down the line in this game in order to still get points in this round. Ooh, and he completely misses to the left. Looks like his pot handle almost clipped Matt's pot, but nonetheless, his goes off into the free go zone, and that sets Matt up for a great potential for a 3-pointer. Ooh, and he does. Very nice, easy shot to close out the round. Look at Matt, very concentrated. Smooth stroke, clearly out before the Lucky Charms fault line. Good sportsmanship here on display at the end of the first game. So Matt leads after 1 game, 8-7. If you're wondering why it's 8-7, it's because the first shot was actually disqualified, is what I'm hearing. If you look here on the instant replay cam for the Lucky Charms fault line, looks like Matt did not release the pot ahead of time, so thus the blue pot is actually disqualified. So Matt gets 2 points on the round, not 3, and he leads 8-7 heading in to the second game. After a brief intermission, we're back for game 2. Matt leads here 8-7, and Steve will have the first toss of the second game. It's a nice little short blocker. I don't know if it's quite short enough, though. That should be fairly easy for Matt to clean off the board if he gets the right angle. Here's his toss, and he got it off the board. And so Matt's in a great position to at least get a point this round, but he's not really blocking the hole from Steve here. This is where it gets interesting from Steve's perspective. Will he go for a little bit of shorter block, or will he go just to cover the hole and hope that Matt misses something? Either way, here he goes. Oh, he goes to knock Matt's out. What a great shot. I didn't even think about that. So Steve is now in the back there. So ideally, if Matt wants to score 2 on the round, he would try to knock Steve's out but avoid getting his own pot out, which is what he tries to go for, but he's a hair to the side of it. If you see that there in the instant replay, if he was more down the middle on that pot, it may have kept his pot in, but instead it deflects off. And that means the first frame of the second game is a wash, 0-0, and the score remains 8-7 as Matt now will be on the defensive. Remember, Matt got to bowl last in the even frames in the first game, which means he now goes first on the even frames in this game. He pushes it a little bit to back. Actually, not a bad pot. Mine kind of set up a little bit of a backboard round. We'll see if Steve goes just to knock it out or if Steve's going to play for the point. Nope, he got a topper. Beautiful hit as it lands in the free go zone. Great shot there from Steve. He's definitely putting himself in a position for a 2 or 3 point round. Matt goes for a blocker of the Pabst Blue Ribbon zone, which means he's hoping that Steve won't clean it here. And Steve does, but it remains in bounds. Luckily, Steve still is able to get a point as he has got the closest pot. So Steve ties the game there at a score of 8-8. Not exactly what Steve wanted, but the score is tied as Steve now goes on the defensive. I really think that was an interesting pot there by Matt. I don't quite understand why he went to block the hole. He really put himself in a situation where Steve was always going to try to clean that. He kind of got a nice break there as we head into the top of the third. Here's Steve's. Steve goes long. Definitely not what you want to see. I think there might be a sliver covering the back part of the last circle, so he might still be on. Matt plays up. I think probably the best play actually would have been to go for the knockoff. He doesn't. Kind of creates an interesting situation. Steve goes for the clean. I think he might be in the situation to score, so Matt just needs to get it anywhere but the back. And what I mean by that is that he just wants to avoid what happened last time, was trying to knock Steve's off the back. It looks like there's a little bit of a debate whether it's in or not. It sounds like after talking it over that they're going to call it in. So if Matt wants to get 2, he's going to need to bounce Steve's off. But you have to wonder, after that first frame, where he kind of missed that shot, if he's going to do the same thing. Nope. It looks like he kind of plays up a little bit. He's going to settle for the point. Take a look on the replay there. You can tell he kind of wanted to actually go a little bit longer. He was trying to get that 2 points. But ultimately, maybe it was a better thing that the shot was a little bit up. So that makes the score 9-8 now, Matt, as he goes on the defensive. Turns the pot handle to the right, so he's hoping to create some drag here. Might be a little bit of a short block, and it is very short. We'll see how Steve handles this. He hasn't seen that short of a blocker in a while. Steve can't just plow through this block and hope to fully clear it off the board. So this is kind of where IFCL play gets a little bit interesting, because it's not just a simple hit and clean that you can kind of come to see. So Steve's talking over with Matt, a little friendly sportsmanship going on as Steve readies himself for the shot. Maybe a little trash talking going on. It's hard to say. Oh, actually, it was an interruption. It looks like a roommate entered play, so that's why there was a little bit of a stoppage. Either way, we should be back and ready to go. Steve, ready with the toss. Oh, he knocks Matt's, but it looks like I said earlier, that's a tough one to clean off, and he only pushed Matt's more on, and it looks like his is kind of short as it stands. Matt has an interesting shot here. Matt lays way up, so both sides are going to go investigate. This is going to create a really interesting shot, I think, here for Steve. I don't know quite how he's going to navigate it.
That's a hard angle for you.
You can't see the blue pot on this camera, but it's
You're gonna hit mine out?
it's kind of blocking the front part of the hole.
You're going for the triple shot?
I'm getting 4 points right here.
Steve sounding awfully confident that he can pull off the rare 4-shotter by banking it off the far right side while also knocking Matt's away. I don't think that's really possible, but we'll see what Steve can do. Remember, Steve is down 9-8 here. Here's his toss, and he hits Matt's out front, but he knocks his further in, so it looks like Steve should pick up, I believe, 2 points as he's got the closest pot.
Ooh, that's a tough
And then
rolling.
his other pot looked like it's
my guess is
just
that's technically on.
barely on. And if you have to remember, in the IFCL, if a pot is just even a sliver on the inside foil of the large circle, it counts as a point.
And I think I have to abide by that.
And it looks like both sides have agreed that that pot is in. And Steve will score 2 to take the lead here,
Otherwise, we're just
10-9. So great round there for Steve. That means Steve leads 10-9 as we head into the 5th frame of the second game. Steve led for the whole first game up until the final frame, so we'll see how Steve does with the lead again. Steve readies his pot, maybe a little bit over to the right. Here's his toss. Ooh, it's a little out in the back. That is not at all what Steve wants. That should be a fairly easy shot for Matt to clean off the board and set himself up for a 2, maybe 3-point round. Matt with an awkward bump, but still gets it to roll off the back of the circle. So Matt is set up for at least a 2-point round here. It'll be interesting to see if Steve goes for the clean knock of Matt's pot off the board. He's obviously going to try it, but it'll be interesting to see if it stays in with his own pot serving at the backboard. Ooh, and he goes for the side swipe and gets it off, but the detriment of his own pot. So now all Matt has to do is get this pot anywhere on the circle to score a point, and he almost goes long. Luckily, it looks like just a sliver of that pot is on.
That's just like yours.
So Matt regains the lead 11-10, but wow, it is by a literal centimeter. Who says that the IFCL isn't a game of inches? It's a game of millimeters, some might say. So as we head in to the 6th frame, Matt has the lead now 11-10 in a back and forth affair. Matt readies the Swiffer sweeper. It looks like he's going with the small pot on his defensive round. Little chatter going on here. Eyes a center hole. Nice. Ooh, and he goes long again. Matt might have a little bit of the jitters, as he's definitely pushing those pots a little long right now. Steve should easily knock that off. Oh, he doesn't even go for it, and he gets a weird little wraparound with the pot handle. Let's take a look at that. Ooh, those pot handles are falling in love, and they're going to settle down there in the back. So now we have an interesting situation in which there's kind of a backboard for both players. If I was Matt, I might just play up here. And Matt kind of does. But he should create a situation in which Steve will still be able to get at least 1 point. Steve's going to look it over. I think he's going to contemplate knocking Matt's off. But and actually, he could knock both of Matt's pots off if he gets clean enough of a strike. It's a difficult shot, though, to say the least. So we'll see if he plays up or if he plays on the aggressive side. We've seen Steve be pretty aggressive and kind of haunt him at times. And he goes for the aggressive shot, but he knocks his own pot off in the process. Luckily, he still has the closest pot, so Steve is still going to score 1 point on the round. So it's hard to fault Steve there. So The game score is tied at 11 now as we head into the 7th frame.
No, see, that was the story even Sean. Sean was, like, great at cleaning them off. You know what I mean?
Steve will now go first as he'll be on the defensive. As I mentioned earlier, Steve is on the defensive for all the odd-numbered rounds as he gets the benefit of bowling last this game. Nice little soft touch. Looks like it's a very short blocker. We'll see how Matt plays this. Again, that doesn't show up on the other camera. Matt tries to plow through it, but as you see that happen with short blockers, it can kind of create a little bit of chaos. So Steve's pot is firmly on, and Matt's is just barely in the front. It'll be interesting to see how Steve plays this, because now Matt's pot kind of serves as a blocker in a sense. Steve doesn't necessarily want to go through that because it will push Matt's pot closer to the 2-point range. So we'll see how Steve approaches it. Oh, and he just goes straight through it and did just what I warned him not to do, as Steve pushes Matt's pot right into the 2-point zone. So now, as this game stands, it would be a wash. Matt just needs to find a way to get this on. And Matt's shot glances off the left side of Steve's pot in the front. Definitely not what Matt wanted, but it looks like that pot maybe just remained barely inside the line. So Matt will be able to sneak out a point despite definitely missing that shot at the end. So the score is 12-11 Matt as we head into the 8th frame of the second game. You have to wonder if Steve has an advantage, as in 2 of the last 3 frames here, he'll be potting last. We'll see what approach Matt will take defensively. He's been known to play up, and looks like that is what he's probably going to do. He's going with the pot out to the side. Oh, it actually turned around a little bit, and he definitely did not put that where he wanted it. It's a little far in the back. That should be pretty easy for Steve to clean, which he's definitely going to go for. We've seen him do it all day. Here's a toss. Oh, and wow, that is not the shot that Steve wanted. He puts himself in a scoring position, but Matt remains on the board. You see that the little back handle of it kind of kept it in. Matt's toss. Ooh, my God. Wow, we have a pile up here. Looks like both Matt's and Steve's pots are in prime position. Matt's going to go investigate. Steve's going to come and join the investigation. Looks like it's too close to tell right now. If it's too close to tell, it would be ruled as a tie, which means Matt would be up on the round by a point.
Oh, that's crazy.
Either way, we got a massive pileup.
I'll fix that.
I mean, it won't matter.
It looks like they're both agreeing
The fact that they're interlocked, I mean, both of those.
to just not acknowledge where the pots lie until after this final pot from Steve. Steve's saying that he'll clean that up. Here's his toss, and he just explodes the pots. Great pot there by Steve. However, it will be a wash. Steve has the closest pot, but Matt's 2 pots remain in bounds. So the score is still 12-11. That's actually a great round there for Matt. It's always great when you don't allow a point when your opponent has the final pot. So Matt now with his final offensive turn of the second game. Steve is on the defensive. He trails by 1. Here's his pot. A nice little short blocker. Maybe a little long, but I think it's pretty good. We'll see if Matt is able to clean it. It's in a tricky spot, and Matt went actually way too soft. So Steve is pushed into scoring position, and Matt kind of replaces Steve's pot as a blocker. So Steve is up a point on the round as it stands. It's a tricky shot here for Steve, though. Does he want to go through Matt's pot like he did earlier in the game? It cost him points earlier, so we'll see if he does it again. And he goes through Matt's and pushes it out of bounds. So actually, Steve has 3 points as it stands currently. Matt.
I have to knock this out, but still be closer than that pot.
Matt going to investigate. As long as he knocks Steve's out, he'll get a point on the round if he's closest. Here's a pot, and he knocks Steve's out, and it looks like he is closest, so Matt will steal a point in what was looking like a 3-point round for Steve.
It's another 1-point game.
So
I didn't put last
it is 13-11 as we head into the final frame of the 10th game. Steve is definitely going to want to capitalize here as he's got the final pot. You want to make it as small of a deficit as possible heading into the third and final game right after this. Matt going with a classic defensive position, and he slides it right into the Pabst Blue Ribbon circle. Again, not where you necessarily want it. If Matt was potting last, that's definitely a good pot, but that should be pretty easy for Steve to clean off of it. Steve has actually been pretty successful in cleaning pots off all day, so we'll see if he can do it again. Ooh, the pot handles collide there and actually clog things up. We saw that happen a little bit earlier in the game to Steve. That is just not what he wants at all. So Matt will come up with his final pot of the second game. Lines it up, and he pops his own pot up and replaces it. So Matt is now right in the middle of the Pabst Blue Ribbon circle and is up 2 on this round. Steve has to knock both of Matt's out. He's got a path, but you have to think with those handles jammed in the back there that it's going to be hard to knock both of Matt's out and steal some points. We'll see how Steve plays it. I wouldn't say he's done particularly well when the board is jammed. Ooh, and he collides with Matt's, but it looks like it's just going to be a wash as Matt's blue pot remains the closest to the Pabst Blue Ribbon circle. So a daring move by Steve, but it doesn't really pay off a whole lot. So that means that Matt leads the game 13-11 as we head into our third and final game of the day. Hello and welcome back for the final game 3 of Matt Lenman versus Steve Cooksey. Matt leads by 2 here entering the final game. Here's his first toss, and it's a little bit long, not a terrible spot to be. Steve's going to have to go in the back to push that off if he wants to clear it. So it'll be interesting to see if Steve just plays it short, ignores Matt's pot, or if he's going to go for the clear. He's talking things over with Matt. Every shot counts now as Steve trails by 2, and there's only 10 frames left. And here he goes. Ooh, he leaves it way short. It's not on the board, so we won't bother showing you it. So now Matt's going to have to think over how he can go around that little front blocker. He goes light too. Doesn't go through Steve, so we have a little bit of a pileup. So Steve has got to go through both of them if he wants to score. It's going to be an interesting shot. Again, we don't have a good angle on it. Steve contemplating. Here's a toss. Oh, and he collides and gets a little bit of a ricochet roll.
What a shot.
And
Yeah, that's funny.
it looks like Steve is going to score 2.
So 2?
So the game is tied at 13 apiece with only 9 frames remaining. Great shot there by Steve, making the best out of a little bit of chaos, I would say. So Steve readies himself. He's now on the defensive. That'll probably be the hardest part about this game for Steve, is that he will not be sitting pot throughout this final game. Matt will be. Matt will have the honors in the final frame. We'll see if it comes down to that. It looks like there's a little bit of an issue with the camera. We're getting that fixed. And we're back to the action. Steve ready for the first toss of the second frame. Goes a little long, kind of similar to Matt's. Not a great spot to be. Should be pretty easy to push off if Matt goes for that. Would put Matt in a great setup if he does. Matt's shot goes hard off the wall, and it's going to lie right at the front of the circle. So that's at risk of being pushed on. So we'll see how Steve plays this. He doesn't really want to hit Matt's on. He might try to go around it. And he definitely clips Matt and knocks it closest to the Pabst Blue Ribbon circle, so not the shot Steve wants. So right now, it would be a wash, as Matt has closest pot and Steve has 2 pots on. So Matt just wants to get a pot on the board. He goes long, but he knocks Steve's off. So Matt still actually steals a point. Definitely not the shot that he wants at all. But he kind of caught a lucky break, clipping Steve's pot in the back there. So Matt goes up 14-13 in this incredibly competitive game.
I don't think there's black ones are.
So we enter the third frame.
That red one was like,
It looks like there's a little bit of a discussion going on here
it's okay.
about pots
I mean, that just shows that
as Matt
hot,
writes down the score.
pretty good.
He's looking at his own pot,
There's no way.
and it looks like he's going over to Steve's pot.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah, we noticed earlier Steve's pot was actually a little bit dented, and I wonder if Matt's kind of questioning if that's going to factor into this game at all. Looks like they're going to settle on the fact that it's just a pot. It doesn't really matter if it's dented or not. And Matt's going to go first this round. He's always on the defensive in the even number rounds.
You know what I mean?
Last time he didn't have a great defensive shot to open, so we'll see if he can be a little bit sharper here. Same shot practically. Again, Matt goes long into the back. Not the shot that he wants at all there. But we'll see if Steve plays in a similar manner as he did last time. Yep, and Steve goes short again. So Steve's pot is very close to being on, but it's not. So it's going to really challenge Matt to go around him. Matt's practically frozen thinking that over. It looks like Matt's going to try to go around on the far right side. He hasn't had much success doing that. Weird grip, and he clips Steve's pot on. So Steve's pot has been pushed on. Matt's is just off. You don't see it.
Get mine in the zone. Yeah, I mean,
But right now, as it stands, Steve is up a point on the round. He has to just avoid pushing Matt's pot on. Ooh, that's not what he wanted. He pushes Matt's small pot on. He still has close pot, but the round is going to be a wash. So the score remains 14-13. Steve had a chance to tie,
it's hard though. Those shots are hard.
but
to
he comes up
detect, right?
just short as we head into the fourth frame. Again, every single frame, every single pot counts right now, as there's only 7 frames remaining. And now Steve's on the defensive, so he's going to try to avoid giving up points. Nice little short blocker there. That might be tough for Matt to clear. We'll see how he can play it. Matt readies himself. Shot. And he clears it. Just barely out of bounds. And Matt goes up 2-0 on the round. Will Steve try to knock Matt's off in a similar fashion? He goes for it, but Matt stays on. You know, that's some of the risk sometimes when that pot isn't quite dead center. It's really hard to square it up. So Matt just has to get this on the board for 3, and he does. Almost went a little long like last time. I definitely think he was thinking about it, but in the end, Matt scores 3 points.
That's a tough blow.
Which means he takes a 17-13 lead as we head into the 5th frame of the game. So Steve is going to have to act pretty quickly to self-correct after that, as he's now in a 4-point hole heading into the 5th frame.
6 frames still to go.
It's especially tough for Steve. Oh, there's this shot, and Matt goes long, so he actually gives a huge opening to Steve, which, as we just discussed, he really needs, especially given that Matt has the final pot advantage for this game. So Steve's going to look to take advantage. Nice little short shot. That's going to be hard for Matt to clean. And even if he does, Steve has set himself up for a 2-point score. And Matt clips it, but Steve's is still the close pot. So as it stands right now, Steve is up a point. And given the fact that he's down by 4, I think he might go to knock off Matt's pot on the left, the blue pot, in hopes of making up the 3 points that he gave up last round. So this is a huge shot in the 5th game of our final game. Oh, and he knocks it off and it almost rolls back in. It doesn't, though. Wow. That was an insane shot.
Because see, visually it's over the duct tape. How do we got it first?
Yeah, so after a slight discussion there, Steve has scored 3, and we are right back in the midst of a tight game. The score now, 17-16 Matt. Steve on the defensive. We'll see if he can carry over the momentum from that round. Puts a nice short blocker. I think probably at just where you want it to be. Matt's going to have a hard time just cleaning that easily. Like I said, Matt doesn't clean it easily. It looks like Matt has close pot right now, though. So as it stands, Matt might be up a point. They're going to go investigate. Let's see what they say. This replay, the pot flips fully on its side and then sways back and forth before landing. It looks like Matt's is closer. And Steve's going to go for, jokingly, a wall ricochet to knock Matt's out of that spot and replace it. So I doubt that's what he's actually going to go for. So we'll see how he plays it. And he knocks Matt. Oh, he actually doesn't knock Matt's out. So Matt stays inbound. Steve now has closest pot. But it looks like Steve's other pot is in as well. So right now, Steve is actually up 2 on the round.
Okay.
What Matt wants to do is get
This is tricky.
close pot. We'll see if he can do that. He's got the board wide open, picks up his sunglasses off the ground. They fell off his hat. Steadies himself. Here's a toss. Wow, he went straight through it. That is absolutely brutal. Actually, it looks like it's only going to be a point. Looks like they're ruling Steve's far pot is actually not on the tin foil. So that was my bad for misunderstanding. So it's going to be a point to Steve, which means that the game is tied, I believe, at 17. Yes, the game is tied now at 17 as Matt fixes the floor a bit as we head into the 7th frame of the game. This is where you have to think about how pivotal it is to have the final pot, which Matt has for this game. The game might be tied heading into the final frame. Having the opportunity to have the final pot of the game might just be the decider. Either way, Matt's on the defensive. Again, he pushes it a little long, not as long as he did earlier, but that's a really easy pot for Steve to clean off. We haven't seen Steve do that, though. He's kind of gone with a short blocking approach. We'll see if he does that again. I don't know if that's a shot that Steve wants. So Matt stays in bounds. Steve takes over, but Matt could just bump Steve's back, and he does. So Matt takes over close pot. His other pot's still in bounds, so Matt's up 2. He's got 3 points. Steve has 1. So Steve needs to get close pot or knock one of Matt's pots off to score. We'll see if he's able to do that. And he knocks it out. Oh, what? He knocks both of them off, and it lands weirdly on its side. We got to get a replay on that. So Matt's is the only pot that stays on, the blue pot. So he scores 2 to take a 19-17 lead.
I would say so.
As we head into
situation,
as we head into the 8th frame. I've never seen a shot like that. That is crazy. Dragged 3 pots off in one shot. That is a once-in-a-lifetime pot shot. So, not at all what Steve wanted. Giving up 2 in a tied game, with Matt having the last pot in 2 of these 3 remaining games. Steve actually goes a little long. He goes right for the Pabst Blue Ribbon Circle, which would be good if he was on offense, but he's on defense. Matt should clean that easily, which he does. Knocks it spiraling into the free go zone. Matt replaces it almost right in the middle of the Pabst Blue Ribbon Circle. So Matt's up 2 on this round. Steve going for the clean. He gets it, knocks it into the Pabst Blue Ribbon zone. This is kind of the bang-bang action that we saw earlier. So Steve is now up 2. Matt wants to just simply knock Steve's out and get the 2 points. Can he do that? No, but he does get the close pot, kind of just wiggles in there. So Matt gets a point and goes up by 3, 20-17. As we head into the 9th frame. Steve has to find a way to score here. This is his last offensive round of the match. And Matt's going to do everything in his power to limit Steve. If you give up a point here, that's fine. If you go up into leading round, oh gosh, that is not at all what Matt wants. He goes way long, leaves the board wide open for a huge opportunity. Look at him. He is suffering in pain there after that shot. Steve, board wide open, and he plays up for some reason. So you can't even see that shot. Matt's going to really have to think about what he's going to do. He's going to go around it on the left is what it looks like.
It's because the handle just
His goes short too, so there's a big log jam. None of the pots are on the board, and Steve's going to have to go investigate for what will probably be the biggest shot of his young career right now. So now we are back in position, ready to go. 9th frame. Steve trails by 3. No pots are on. Steve needs to find a way to score. And it explodes, but it doesn't look like it's in favor of anybody. It's hard to see because our camera cuts it off. But it looks like it's actually a wash. As Matt has close pot with the blue one over there, but Steve has both of his pots on. So that counts us out for a score. They're having a hard time processing that information right now.
Yeah? I am
That's
do you think those are equal?
not at all
It's hard to see. I feel like they're equal-ish.
what Steve would want. So we will head into the final frame, down by 3, and Steve needs an absolute miracle. We've never had somebody score 3 points on a defensive round. It is one of the hardest things to even score on a defensive round. It takes some severe missteps by the final potter. Matt's reviewing the score here.
yeah, you need 3 on the defensive round. Never been done.
Informing Steve of the situation that he's playing in. We'll see if Steve tries to adapt to the situation, if he does anything unique strategy-wise, or if he'll just play it straight and hope for a miracle. Steve's toss. Good short blocker, just top of the circle. Hard to see. You can see a glimpse of it there. Will Matt just play up and go through? Oh, he goes through it and he gets a topper. Huge shot. If you didn't know, if a pot is flipped on its top, that pot is eliminated. So Matt's going to come down here and clean that off into the free go zone. So that pretty much would wrap up the game. Makes it impossible for Steve to score more than 2 points on the round, given that he trails by 3. That wraps it up. So these next 2 pots are relatively meaningless. Steve contemplated that in his brain a little bit. He swipes Matt's off the board, keeps his on, and this shot doesn't matter at all. So we'll see if Matt even takes it seriously, if he'll try to score. Gently tosses it down there. And barely gets it on. Steve has a closer pot, though, so Steve will score. So the final score is 20-18 in favor of Matt. It was a tight third game, though, as the score for the third game ends up being 7-7. If you really look back at it, in a game that was only decided by 2 points, you have to think back to that first game in which Matt scored in the 10th frame, scored 2 points in that final frame, which was the decider. But overall, this was a fantastic debut of an IFCL broadcast.